Good afternoon, welcome. This is xTalk. My name is Molly Ruggles. I'm with the Office of Digital Learning in the residential unit. Today we're thrilled to host Lou Guenier, who will talk about an educational revolution for a digital world. I have a few announcements before we start. If you've noticed, we are videotaping, and we will post it publicly to the ODL website. So if for any reason you feel uncomfortable being on the videotape, just sit towards the back and it'll be okay. Let's see. I have a clipboard going around. If you would sign in, that would be great. What it does is it helps us better serve you and do better programming if we know who's here and what your interests might be. So please do that. I'll start it over here with Jonathan. And then we have a speaker on, I just want to let you know that Shailendra Mehta will be speaking on September 27th here in this same room from 3 to 4:15. He's going to speak on freedom of speech and academic freedom in India and the West. And he spoke a few years ago on the history of universities as it relates to Indian universities, and it was a really great presentation, so I encourage you to come. So just a little bit about our speaker, Lou Guenier. Guenier served as pedagogical director of 42 Silicon Valley, which is an innovative engineering college. He was developing curriculum and working as a software engineer. And it's really interesting that he was also a Buddhist monk. And I think our Vice President of Open Learning, Dr. Sanjay Sarma, is going to say a little bit more about Lou, so I'll hand it over to Sanjay. Please welcome Sanjay Sarma.
Thank you, Molly. I just wanted to say that a few years ago, I heard about a university called, get this, 42. That's the number. And does anyone know where that comes from? Come on, you know where it comes from. All right, so check this guy. And it's free, and there are no degrees, and I was very intrigued, and I went and visited. It was set up by a French entrepreneur, a French billionaire, and I was absolutely fascinated by the tour. I made notes, and then much later, through a series of friendships, I was introduced to Lou, who's a fascinating character to begin with, and then he was also deeply involved not only in 42, in the first graduating class of 42, the university in Paris, but also the one in Fremont, California. So Lou's going to tell us about it, and I think he'll do. I was going to send my notes out to people, but that would have been nothing compared to what Lou can tell us. So Lou, take it away. Thanks very much.
So, hello everyone, and I'm very happy to be here, and thank you very much for coming. So today I'm going to talk about an innovative approach on education in our digital age. So in order to do that, I'm going to split the time we have in three. So first, I'll be talking about how our world has changed in certain aspects. Then I'll be asking you to help me design a new educational system based on a few criteria. And then I'm going to talk about a new educational system, so 42, this new educational system I've encountered. But first, let me add some more to what Molly said. So I'm Lou, I'm French, she already told you that. But what she hasn't told you is that at a very young age, as every kid, I wanted to explore the world, to see it with my own eyes. And I had the opportunity to do that. So when I was 12, I left the traditional educational system to go wander around the world. So I ended up in this place in India, a very remote place, as you can see, filled with Tibetan monks, and that's where at the age of 12, I became a Buddhist monk. So you might be wondering now, what am I doing here at MIT, talking about education, talking about new ways of innovative educational system, and you might be also not seeing the Buddhist monks as the most innovative person in terms of education, pedagogy, and even in the digital world. And you're probably right for most of them. But for me, I've always had a passion about technology and computers. Even when I was either in India or in France, in very remote places in the mountains, with no electricity or no internet, I took upon myself to build a renewable energy supply for these places and to build Wi-Fi bridges across the mountains to get access to that technology and to quench my thirst on the digital world. So thankfully, the Dalai Lama always said that monks should be in their time, that they should be modern monks, and that many great Tibetan scholars came to realize that they could, using that digital world and using those digital means, they could transmit their knowledge to the people that wanted to have access to that knowledge. And they asked me to help them build a platform to put people with interest in the West, with interest for Tibetan language or these philosophy, with them. So the passion I had was not only accepted in that world, in that very traditional and we can say archaic world, but it was also encouraged. And so in the remote Himalayas, we were disrupting the way people were learning Tibetan, were learning the Buddhist philosophy, and they didn't have to travel across the world, or they didn't have to quit their job to come and study for a year or so. They could do it from their home, from their couches, through the digital world. And so I realized that that small digital disruption we were putting in place was part of something much bigger that was happening in the world. Nowadays, with the digital technology, every person on the planet has potentially more impact on the planet, on the society and their environment than the President of the United States 20 years ago. And this is because the scope of action of every person on the planet went from a very local environment to a global one. But a question remains is, are we sure that we are ready, that we are prepared to have such powerful tools in our hands? And is those tools a gift, or more like giving the nuclear codes to kids? And are we preparing the younger generation to have such powerful tools in their hands? So now let me ask you to imagine a completely new society, a completely different society, and where we have to design an educational system. In that society, people have a very limited access to information. People have very little impact on the world or on the environment around themselves. And this world is deeply rooted in tradition and status quo, where most of the jobs are repetitive and don't need creativity, where only the productivity of a worker is being taken into account, where interactions between people are mostly driven by competition, and where a small number of people decide and make choices for the rest of society and are in charge of knowledge transmission. So with all these criteria, if I ask you to design, or if we think about designing a new educational system, chances are we're going to end up with something very similar to our current educational system that dates back to the Italian 11th century and that hasn't gone through major disruption or that hasn't evolved a lot in terms of knowledge transmission. Now I'm going to ask you to do the same exercises, but with different criteria. This time, this world has, every people have a constant access to information. People have the possibility to impact the world on a global scale and not just on a very local and small scale. Every person has a personal work path that is very tailored to them. They can switch jobs, they can change their jobs, and they don't have to make a choice at 18 and stick with it for the rest of their life. Where innovation is the driving force of the economy, where collaboration is at the center of human interactions, where you have to collaborate and think more globally than just about yourself, and where decisions and choices for the society are made by a collective intelligence. So if I ask you if we design an educational system based on those criteria, chances are we're going to end up with something very different than what we previously designed. And in that world, why would we limit relationships and interaction to a one-way structure, to a very vertical structures between masters and students? Why would we reduce learning to lectures? Why would we passively listen when we can actively learn? And why would we rely on only one person to tell us about the world when the whole world is talking to us directly? Why would we pretend there is only one solution to problems when we can see every day that one problem has multiple solutions, multiple different solutions? Why would we let others decide what question we ask ourselves when we're fully capable of asking the questions ourselves? And why would we learn skills we used to 50 years ago when the world has changed so much? So now let me just show you something that's called Webb's depth of knowledge. That's a depth of knowledge, and you have 4 levels in that. In the first system we designed, we are only at the first level, where we are just recalling knowledge, where we are just remembering something we've been taught to solve a problem. We are not going to level 4, that is the second system we've designed, where we are having to do extensive thinkings, where one problem has multiple solutions, and where we have to do critical thinking to solve those problems. Why in that world would we also learn the exact same thing as our neighbor is and pretend to be the exact same as he is? Why would we ask a student to make a choice, an irrevocable choice at 18 and stick with it for the rest of his life? And why would we consider collaboration cheating and competition to be the good way to do? And isn't it ironical to ask people to be collaborative when they get out in the world when we've been teaching them for 12 years to do the opposite? And are we sure that it's still a reasonable choice to emphasize on a competitive and individualistic behavior in younger generations' education when we are facing such a dramatic problem? And is it the best way to solve those crises such as war, world hunger, and, excuse my French, climate change? It is the first time in human history that we're facing such a global scale crisis and that we have the tools necessary to solve it. The tools nowadays are not the problem to solve those crises anymore. And sorry, I'm not going to quote here some great Tibetan scholar or something like this. And I'm going to be in my time by saying that with great power comes great responsibility. And that's what pushes me as a software engineer not to work on cutting-edge technologies such as advanced robotics or artificial intelligence or all these fancy words we're hearing nowadays, but more on preparing the younger generations to be ready to use those tools. And so, for the past couple of years, my main focus has been to find and develop places where students learn the mastery of the tool, where they learn how to interact with that tool and to master that tool, but at the same time where they develop a consciousness of their environment, of who they are, and of the potential impact on the world they have. And lastly, where they're able to interact with one another, not in a competitive way, but rather in a collaborative way, working towards the same goals. So I'm not here to give you the one and only answer to all the educational challenges we have. There is no such thing as one good answer for such a complex problem. But I'm rather here as a witness of an educational system called 42, as a guinea pig, having gone through that new educational system myself to be trained as a software engineer, and also as an agent of that system, as I've been working as a staff member there, first as a software engineer, but then as the pedagogical director for the 42 US campus that I helped found. So 42 is not an online program. It has campuses, one in Paris and one in the Bay Area. And as you walk into those campuses, you might be surprised by a couple of things. Amongst themselves, there is no teachers, there is no classes, there are no time schedules, there is no age or year ranking, there is not a single program, and there aren't sets of classes in a specific order that together form a program such as a computer science degree or an engineering degree. And there is a great cultural and social diversity. And one of the reasons for that great cultural and social diversity is 42 is free. It's open to everyone, and you don't need any diploma to get in. You don't need any qualifications except to pass the entrance test. So now that you know what 42 doesn't have, let me tell you what 42 is and what it has. So first off, 42 is a physical place filled with students, computers and chairs. the computers are not entitled to a student. A student can move around to any computer he wants during the day if the computer is free. His files are going to be synced from the servers, and he's going to be able, by doing so, he's going to be able to work with different students and interact with different groups of people and not just with the same groups. It is also a virtual place, so this is a representation of the projects the student have. So each circle represents a project, and each line represents the path a student can take. So for example, I've taken this from a student in Paris. So every green circle represents the project he successfully did. The red projects is the project he failed. He can still do them again, but he failed them. The last time he did them, he failed them. And the grey projects are the projects he's going to be able to do. But instead of giving you a long list of what 42 is, I'm going to use a couple of examples that represent, well, what 42 is. So let me introduce you to Adam. He was an analyst, or well, he's an analyst in the French military, and he joined the inaugural class of 2013 in order to acquire some more skills. So this is the project map I've already told you about, but as you can see, the green and red and grey projects are a little bit different because every student can tailor what he's learning to his own will. He doesn't have to go through a specific path. He can choose which path he's going and which path he's taking, what he wants to learn. So as you can see, we have an upper branch that is Unix. We have a branch that is algorithm that is graphics. So Adam chooses to go at the 3 branches at the same time, but you can go in either branches or all of them at the same time. It is as you like. So students tailor their curriculum. They also tailor the time frame as they want. They don't have to finish in 3 years. They don't have to finish in a certain amount of time. They can take as long or as short as they want. The fastest student we had took only a year to finish the whole curriculum. He was a genius, but it only took...
Can you explain what the path is? Are you going outwards or?
Yeah, you're going outwards. So you're starting from the left branch, you're walking to the middle, and at the middle it splits. So the first projects are just to give you a base, and after you have the upper branch that is graphics, that is Unix, the branch that is straightforward, that is algorithm, and the branch that goes downwards, that is graphics. After you have some branches that are detached from the rest, that are, for example, web development or mobile development, or things that don't necessarily match the 3 branches, the 3 main branches. So they can tailor the work path as they want, but also as the campus never closes and as there is no teacher or classes, they can come in whenever they want. The campus is open 24/7, 365 days a year. So Adam, for example, was able to tackle his full-time job in the military and come every day for 4 or 5 hours at night and work on his projects. So Adam is also a captain, not in the French army yet, but in the 42 curriculum, as 42 is made like a video game. You start as a cadet of a level 0, and you walk your way up through the ranks and through the levels to a level 21 admiral. And when you reach level 21, this is when you're supposed to have graduated. To gain levels, you need experience, and experience is acquired by projects you complete. The harder the project, the more experience you're going to get, and the better the grade is, the better the experience, the more experience you're going to get for those projects. So Adam is level 17 and 96% in 3 levels and 4%. He's going to graduate, but that doesn't mean he can't still come to 42 and learn new projects. All the time projects are being added to the 42 curriculum. The map you saw is expanding every month with some new projects. So if in 3 years he decides he wants to acquire some new skills that are in the projects, he can still come and gain some more levels. So this is a project page. You have a couple of things on that project. You have a short descriptions that is going to tell you what the project is. This is one of the first projects Adam did, so it's a wall 3D, and the description reads as follows. So it says, inspired by the world-famous 90s game of similar naming, which was the first FPS ever, explore the techniques of raycasting. The goal is to create a dynamic view inside of a maze, and how far will you go to create the best game we've ever seen? So you have a description that tells you what this is. You have a 5-minute introductory video that is going to give you a few leads on what you need to do to complete that project, and you're going to have the specifications on the project. You also have a lot of statistics, such as the success rate of the students that have taken that project, the average time students take for these projects, and the marks repartition for every campus we have. You also have how many students did this, how many teams there was, and all these informations about projects. But another very important founding principle of 42 is the peer-to-peer interaction. I already told you that as you walked in the 42 campus, there is no teachers and no classes, because everything at 42 is peer-to-peer based. From the learning to the corrections, all the projects rely on your peers. If, for example, Adam had questions on raycasting, he could go online or turn to the peer to his left or turn to the peer to his right. And all of these things are going to be sources of knowledge for Adam. He's going to diversify those sources of knowledge. And by doing so, he's then learning how to solve problems and make his way through the enormous flow of informations we are constantly subject to. He's developing critical thinking by taking the relevant informations in this flow of information, taking the relevant informations, processing it, and coming up with ideas and different solutions for the problems he's facing. Once he completed his project, he's going to get corrected by 3 to 5 peers, and his final grade on his profile is going to be the average grades that those students gave him. So this is Adam's profile. So as you can see, grades are going to have a repercussion on his experience, but it is also going to show the skills he acquired. So you can see here on the radar chart which skills he developed the most, as every project is focusing and emphasizing on different skills. So you have rigor, or you have algorithms, security, database, all of these skills. So on the radar chart, you can see which one he is the best at, and the ones that he's either not interested in or that he's having some difficulties on. But some projects don't have guidelines and are more centered on a team. So now I'm going to take the example of the J-Gravity team. A couple of months ago, we were approached by a team of scientists and of mathematicians that wanted to do a galaxy simulation, a simulation of the universe. But they didn't have nor the computational power or the funds to put it in place. So they came to us, to 42 in Silicon Valley, and asked us to help them do that. So we had a team of 4 students that volunteered to do this project and to help them tackle the problem they had. So the project was to make the calculations run on 1,000 computers that we have at 42 Silicon Valley. We have 1,000 computers plugged into the network. And so their project was to divide the computational power between the computers to run that simulation. And because the curriculum is highly flexible, it allowed those students to devote a couple of months to this project, and this project was in turn added to the experience they have. If the project is successful and they deem it useful, they think they learned some new skills that could be of potential interest for other students, they can go to the pedagogical team and add it to the curriculum. This goes for all of the students at 42 if they think that the curriculum is lacking some skills or some new technology. They can participate in the expansion of the project, in the expansion of the project map you've seen. And this happened for a lot of projects at 42, like Swift and Kernel and all these projects that were added by the students. And what this does is keep the curriculum up to date, and students can see that they are always being an actor of the 42 pedagogy. And I've also heard one time a story about a teacher assistant that say that the worst feeling he had when he was teaching as a teacher assistant was that he felt he couldn't participate, or that what he was teaching was engraved in stone and that he had no say in it. He was just here to repeat and convey what he was taught to say. That brings me to my last example. I told you earlier that I was a pedagogical director at 42, but that 42 didn't have any teachers or didn't have any teachers or classes. And you might be wondering, does that school have only students, or what is the role of the staff members, except from the obvious system maintenance? The role of the staff is here to push the students as far as possible in terms of critical thinking and problem solving by making available all the time to the students new challenges and problems that they have never seen before, they have never faced before. It is also here to maintain a climate of pursuit of excellence and a dynamic where students are always trying to be as thorough as possible and to push the boundaries of their knowledge as far as possible. And lastly, it's here to make sure that the 42 spirit doesn't die and that the class effort is always there, that they feel parts of something. So now at the beginning of this talk, I shared with you some of the concerns and questions I've had, and the questions I've had. And I've talked about this new educational system I've been through and I've been part of. And so now I want to see if it answers the worries and the questions I had and how it does that. So it emphasized on communication between students because of the peer-to-peer aspect. And from a good communication comes collaboration between students. They learn how to collaborate with each other. And lastly, on those two, it builds trust. They trust their peers, and like when you're working on a project with another person and you're giving him a task, you need to trust him to finish it before the deadline. And because they're used to communicating and collaborating together, they have that trust. And also students, as most human beings on the planet nowadays, are constantly subject to an uncensored flow of information. There is a huge flow of information, and they are learning critical thinking by filtering the relevant information, processing it, and coming up with new ideas. They're also able, from that uncensored flow of information, to solve problems that they've never faced before. You don't have to tell them the solution to a problem for them to be able to solve it. They are also realizing that they are the only person responsible for their learning. There is no one that is going to help them learn, and they are the sole agent of their learning, of their knowledge. They are deciding where they want to go. They are deciding which path they want to take, and they know they can focus on something they feel passionate about, and they don't have to go and do something they're not interested in or they don't deem useful. And finally, a critical point is that they become conscious of their environment. They become aware of their surroundings. So 42, in short, is at the cutting edge innovation of the educational system, but it's not about teaching. It's about students coming here to learn how to learn. So now you might be wondering if I'm telling you that 42 is the answer to all the questions we're having, and is 42 the answer to all the questions we have in the universe? So as there is not one answer to a question, to most of the questions there is not a single answer, a single correct answer. For starter, 42 is not made for everyone. On the first year in the Paris campus, we had 70,000 people that applied for it, and only 900 made the cut. It's not because we have a restriction in space, because as Sanjay was saying, we have a billionaire behind us, and he always said, take the students that deserve to come in, and if you don't have enough space, I'll give more money for it. So it's not because that, but it's because they either were not interested in it, they didn't understand how it worked, or they didn't pass selection. Second of all, it has 42 is in person. It has only 2 campuses, one in Paris and one in Silicon Valley. And even though 42 is free, not everyone can afford rent in either Silicon Valley or Paris. And lastly, 42 is limited to people under 30. So that cuts out a large number of people. But it is working. It is a system that is working for the people that are going through it. It is working. And even 4 years after we opened 42, we have people in all the big companies. We have alumni from 42 that started with no knowledge of computer science at all, and that 4 years later are working for those big companies or are starting startups that are quite successful. You can also see it is working when you look at the students we have that have a huge sense of critical thinking, that loves problem solving. I mean, you can't imagine how students are thrilled when you throw a problem at them with no solution that is practically impossible to do, and they have to solve it. They just love it. They have a huge sense of community and collaboration. They know how to interact with each other. They know how to defend a project they built. They know how to work and split a workload. And they're also very passionate about what they do. I have an example. So we have achievements at 42, and the achievements doesn't bring you anything. The achievements are just here in the gamified aspect of it. And one of the achievements is continuously working for 48 straight hours on your computer. Students are always really passionate about this achievement. I don't know why. But even one time, we had a fire alarm. So we had a fire somewhere in the building. So we had to escort all the students out of the building. And I've had to almost physically remove a student from his desk because he was about to complete the 48-hour. He slept here. He had his alarm every hour to continue work on it. And so yeah, they feel very passionate about it. So I've told you earlier, I came here as a witness of that system and to relate what I've seen and the conclusions I've drawn from it. But I'm also here because I want to make this a global reality wherever people are asking for it. It is something that is feasible, and I'm here to make it available and participate eventually where it's necessary. So I would like to thank Sanjay for inviting me. I'm a huge fan of his work. I also want to say that I've seen MOOC taking more important places in education nowadays, and it's something that's very dear to me, having gone through the 42 curriculum and having used these resources a lot. And especially edX, that is something, if you think about it, that is something unique and that's never happened before, where you have teachers from prestigious universities such as MIT, Harvard, and all these prestigious universities. You have teachers giving classes to the whole world. I mean, you have people in all of the world in very remote places where you can barely think they have electricity. You have people attending classes from teachers as those prestigious universities. So now the challenges I still see in educations is making the knowledge transmission less vertical and more horizontal. And he's also using the active learning and the collective intelligence to progress in education. And open learning, initiatives such as open learning are going in that direction, and I can only rejoice from that. And I'm sure that many of you here are having great ideas, are implementing those ideas and making it a reality. And I think that many of the features of 42 could play a critical role in that. Features such as the constant innovations of the content, the peer-to-peer interaction, and the fact that it's building an efficient fitted framework. So we are going through an educational revolution, and I want to be part of it as much as possible. So thank you all for coming. Thank you, MIT, for hosting me. It's an institution I've always admired, and being here for the past couple of days, talking with some of you and exchanging on it has been a very great experience. I I would like also to thank the people at 42 that showed me that a new educational system was possible, and especially the 2 months I've had over there, and the 42 US students that gave me, that fueled my passion for changing educational system. So thank you all for coming, and if you have any questions.
So apparently we have a great ambient mic. So if you have questions, you can speak from my end. So we'll start with Swati and you.
Yes.
I have two questions. The first, you mentioned twice that you have an entrance, some kind of entrance requirement.
Yes.
I wanted to know how you assess who should come to 42. That was my first one. And you talked about collaboration in when a student is in 42 and they are working on something and they're stuck, they turn to the people around them and ask questions. That's just asking for help at a given moment. Have you thought of a broader scope of collaboration where you need different expertise to complete a task? Because in the end, I still see each person working on individual tasks and they are getting help from people, but the task does not require multiple people to be completed. It still is essentially a solo task.
Mm-hmm.
So those are my two.
Okay, so what was your first question? Your first question was?
How do you assess who can come in? What is your entrance?
Okay, so the selection process is in 2 stages. You have one that is online, that everyone can take, where you have one memory test and one logic test. We don't tell them what they have to do. They have to find what they have to do by themselves. And once they complete that, they come on campus for what we call the swimming pool, because it's on a sink or swim basis. So it's basically 4 weeks of boot camp. 4 weeks every morning at 8:42, we give them a series of projects. And at 11:42 p.m. the next day, they have to submit it. And that's every single day for 4 weeks, Saturday, Sunday included. At the end of those 4 weeks, we have something like 30 criterias that are going to help us select the students. We don't tell them what the criterias are. It's not solely based on the grades they get, because we think that there is something more to 42 than just the level you have. And we don't think that 42 should only take what we call the best students, the one with the best grades, but also you need some soft skills to go through that process. And that relates a little bit with the second questions you had. That was the interaction between the students. So 42 is free. 42 doesn't have a huge reputation yet. So the only thing that is going to make the students hireable is the reputation they create, the level they have. So every student knows that their peers is going to be the only thing that is going to make them potentially hireable. So they are going to be ready to help those as they're expecting some help from the others. Does that answer your question or not really?
Sort of.
Okay.
The tasks are still solo.
No, you have group projects. Most of the big projects are group projects. So the first projects are solo, but after you have most of the projects are group projects, and it's either randomly assigned or you choose your team. It's randomly assigned because it's a good way of mixing people up, and we all know that by mixing people you come up with new ideas. But most of the projects are group projects.
And you also give the lowest grade? What was that?
Okay, so when you get graded as a group, you don't go separately. You go all of the students, and in the guidelines for the corrector, that is one of your peers as well, that is another student that is going to grade you, this student is going to have to find the weakest link, because we all know that a machine is as strong as its weakest link. So it's going to have to find the person that seems, I don't know, the most shy. And when you have a group, every student is going to bring different skills to the table. But by the end of the project, every student should master all the skills for this project. So all of the students, even if you didn't code it, you are supposed to be able to explain it and redo it.
So you had a question?
What happens when it does interact with the outside world? Because I think it's incredible. I think it should have been done. So the question is, what are the forces that made the other stuff happen? And clearly those forces are out of feudal structures and hierarchical structures. an incredible exponential distribution of wealth in this world and so on.
Mhm.
And these are very powerful forces.
Mhm.
And when they go to work at another company, they're not going to find the nice, wonderful, as you said, motivated to help each other to
Mhm.
make the reputation of the school get stronger and so forth. So how do they then find themselves when they get into many companies which have very toxic situations,
Mhm.
that are incredibly competitive, particularly in biosciences nowadays and some other places, and how do they cope? And it's the only way I could conceive it is if your graduates themselves formed a company, which could then become a super success because they worked in such a better, more innovative, creative way.
So ideally, our students are supposed to collaborate and work collaboratively, but as you know, I mean, everywhere there is human behaviors. So there is going to be still some students that are going to be very selfish, even at 42. So they're going to get used to that. Also, they are interacting with the rest of the world. They're not secluded in 42. So I think they're also subject to these kind of behaviors. And also, I think that education is forging the societies of tomorrow. And that if you have a certain number of students that are collaborating and that are willing to collaborate with each other, when they get out of the world, I think it can change the way people are behaving, even in very competitive environments.
So in other words, it could be almost a very benevolent, beneficial mean. It's
Yeah.
kind of like viruses that mutate that cause.
Exactly, yeah, yeah.
A gene drive. A gene drive.
Yes, gene drive, right?
I have 4 questions, but I asked 2 first. Let's see if I can ask more in the end. The first one is the physical space important, and how have you assessed that the school cannot just be virtual? And the second question that I had, what happens to the IP, the intellectual property that is produced when you have projects that are based on a customer's request? Like you described, there were a bunch of scientists that threw a problem at the students and they worked on that.
So can you ask
Okay,
first question?
Is physical space important?
Okay, so
And why not have a virtual reality, like virtual space?
yeah, so I was not part of the first opening team in 42 Paris. I was a student there from the inaugural class. I don't really know why they decided to make it only in person. Maybe because it's easier to transmit a spirit when it's only in person.
I have an insight. I
I
asked
actually
on the contest.
believe, I think
Right.
it is important.
But
too,
they said that they wanted the first year to be in person. There was a theory.
Yeah.
And that the remaining years they could do online. They wouldn't have to come in, except for a week or something, right?
Okay, so they tried to do the 4-week selection. They tried to do it off campus, and it didn't have that power, the power it has. If you ask any 42 students, your biggest educational experience you had, the biggest shock you had coming at 42, they always say it's the 4 weeks. I mean, it was just crazy. For me, it was just crazy. You have people falling asleep because they've been working for 20 straight hours. You have people passing out in the hallways. I mean, it's just crazy. It's a really crazy experience, and I think that needs to be in person. But I think you could also do it remotely, because you don't have to gather all the people in one place. You could have small groups scattered around the world. You could have groups working remotely together. So yeah, maybe I'm not part of 42 anymore, and they are maybe working towards something like this, but I'm not sure how it's going to work.
And the other
Swimming
question
pool
was
sounds
this.
like MIT on steroids.
Yeah.
So the other question I had was who does the
You said the
IP
IP.
Okay.
belong to the
So all of the projects they are doing belongs to them, belongs to the students, and the person that came in and asked the mathematicians that came in and asked us to help them, they are going to deal directly with the students for that. So I don't know what kind of agreement they made, but they are going to deal directly. We are only a facilitator. We are only here to provide a frame. If they want to go outside the frame, it's their job.
Martin had a question.
So first of all, I also have two questions, but they might be tough to answer, so feel free to just choose one.
Okay.
Second, I'm still kind of trying to collect.
We're all about
thoughts on
choice at
this.
MIT.
So I'll try to be as coherent as possible in this. A lot of the stuff that you mentioned with things like peer instruction and why would we learn by listening to what one person has to say and not using all the resources available. One of the areas in which I would say that I've seen this go wrong is that despite the diversity of information that we have available, not all of that information is correct.
Uh-huh.
Not all of that information is of high quality.
Yeah.
To give an extreme-ish example, I came across a few years ago a very active YouTube community of people devoted to proving that the Earth is indeed flat. Not as a hoax, some of them I'm sure are, but there are in fact people who believe this.
Mhm.
And I guess one of the surprising things is the arguments are not trivial. The
Yeah.
arguments actually make you stop and think, like, well, why doesn't a plane gyroscope drift when the plane is going over the horizon if it's an inertial thing instead of a gravity? Turns out I've learned a lot by looking at some of these videos just because I had to look up why some of these things are in fact the way they are. Turns out that gyroscopes have a mechanism specifically to compensate for that. So how, if you are focusing so much on peer assessment and peer instruction, how can you ensure that the quality of the material that people are learning is sufficiently high? And not just in terms of correctness in achieving the result, but for things like code, maintainability, code quality, this kind of things, which novices are less likely to have a grasp on.
You could have a really bad idea sort of propagate, right?
Yeah, for
Put it
sure.
this way, and it's actually quick sort and not bubble sort or something.
Yeah.
Right?
So I think first, if you have enough students, you're going to have a general idea that is going to develop that is probably the most logic one. Also in computer science, in software engineering at least, it's easy to see if it's true or not, if it's working or not. And after, for the cleanness of the code, I'd say most of the students have a basic idea. Then you're going to have some students that are more advanced than others, or you're going to have alumni coming over. You're going to have the resources on internet telling you what clean code is and what isn't. And regarding bad ideas propagating, I'd say yes, in the safe environment of school, if you just give them good ideas, then what's going to happen when they get out in the world? They wouldn't have developed this sense of analysis of whether it's relevant or not informations. And when they get out in the real world and they're facing a problem they have to find a solution to, they're going to be facing all of them. And they're not going to be in the safe environment of a university. Whereas at 42, they're in a safe environment, so they can get wrong either way, but they are here to learn how to develop a sense of judgment on those good and, well, right and wrong ideas. And you said it yourself, you learned something new because of those crazy theories. So that's what we want to push students to learn new things.
So we're going to come back to your other question later. Ian, did you have a question?
Well, I just want to make a comment about how to stop poor code, and by that I mean code that's difficult to maintain.
Yeah.
Because I got a lot of experience doing that a long time ago. What you do is you give the students some code that's absolutely terrible and tell them to fix it.
Yeah.
Because what that does is it drives home to them that you're not just coding for you to look at this. Someone might have to do it later. So you get the sense of, just writing the code, there's no comments, there's no structure, whatever, doesn't do it.
Well, it happens a little bit when they review their peers, because when they're correcting a student on their code, they're going to try and read it and they're going to ask, okay, can you explain me the code? And we all know that badly written code is very hard to explain once you've written it. So it's going to happen, I'd say it's going to happen by itself. It sounds maybe a little bit too magical or something like this. But yes, when you're gonna get criticized 5 times on the same project for the same reasons, because you're gonna have badly written code or something like this. And also at 42, we give them some sort of frame. We give them a norm for writing codes. For example, functions can be longer than 25 lines, because otherwise we just put everything in one function and not understand and defeat the purpose of a function. So we have this structure that helps them develop something new. I'm not saying that we shouldn't tell them what to do all the time, but we should, I think, diversify the sources of knowledge.
So I really like your approach, and I think it's really interesting and thought-provoking. But I'm a little bit troubled by the 1.3% acceptance rate that I think, you know, if I saw your numbers correctly.
Yeah.
So are you saying that really only about 1% of the population is able to learn this way? And what does that say about this as a possibility of being a more broad-reaching project for more people?
Okay, so the billionaire that did the opening conference is very, very well known in France. It's like, I don't know, it's like Bill Gates or Mark Zuckerberg here. So when he did that, I'd say you have at least 20,000 people or more that were just curious, that were just looking in what it is, what it was. And because it's free, most of them were not motivated and didn't plan on going further. So I'd say there is a lot of curious people. So if you look at when we went from the first stage to the second stage, to the full-week boot camp, we had about 3,000 students that registered for the first year boot camps. So it was split in 1,000, it was 3 times 1,000 over 3 months. So I think the correct numbers would be taking the 3,000 rather than 70,000. We had 70,000 people applying for it, but we had also only 3,000 that wanted to go really through the boot camp. Another thing is we don't limit we only ask for their email address. So maybe some opened 5 different email addresses and found out that they weren't making the cut, so tried again. Also, it was the first year, so there was some people that were thinking it's not going to work. It's just something he launched, but it's not going to work. So they did the first week and got discouraged by it, because it's very, very demanding. People would say just, no, I'm not interested in it. I'd say by the end of every month, we took about 50% of the people that made it all the way through.
So we have like 2 or 3 minutes more. Maybe we'll take 1 or 2 more questions, quick questions. Yep.
And just sort of as a follow-on with that, it seems like it's designed to filter for very strongly self-motivated individuals, and the structure works very well for them. Have there been any cases where people were a little less motivated, and is there anything built in the system to help motivate people? Because one of the things in a traditional environment is you have the teacher saying, oh, you have to do this, but when it's just your peers, is it just because they're self-motivated individuals that they don't just lounge around and decide to play video games together, or?
Well, some of them do, but we tell them they're not allowed to play video games on the computers because they're using resources. And also, when you have one teacher, it's very difficult for him to motivate, 40 students, where, once again, it's purified. So because they're going through something very difficult, they are looking for help around them. And even the students that are less motivated are being motivated by other students around them, pushing them and saying, come on, hang in there, and we're all in this together. And there is a huge sense of community, and they are, you see them pushing themselves, waking one another up to go work again and do all this kind of stuff. So I think the peers around you are even a better motivation because they're going through the same thing as you are. And it's not an entity above you just saying, you should do this and do this. But it's rather someone walking through ice and fire with you.
So I guess it may work as long as you have a critical mass of motivation, that the less motivated people are fine.
Yeah.
The trickier problem is what if you end up with a large group of unmotivated people? What do you do?
So I was watching a video the other day on YouTube about an admiral from the American Navy talking about his SEAL training. And he was saying there is apparently in 1 week, they're just all in the mud together. They're neck deep into the mud.
Commencement speech.
Yeah, it was a commencement speech. Yeah. And so he was mud, they were neck deep into the mud. And it was freezing cold. They haven't slept for 3 days. And you had one student, not student, sorry. You had one candidate that started singing. And he said, you had one after the other, they started singing. The drill sergeant said, if you continue singing, I'm going to add 4 hours. But he said, because one started singing, we all went through the night. We all did the night. The mud seemed a little bit less cold and all of this. So I don't think it's like a domino effect. I don't think you need a large number to motivate a few people. I think just one person is enough to motivate a lot of students.
I have one more question. How many folks here saw the movie that we screened here last week, which was Most Likely to Succeed? Sparky, Cheryl, anyone else? So if you haven't seen it, I think there's a pirated version on YouTube. Not that we support pirated version. Don't do that. Watch it. And it's amazing. That's for pre-kindergarten. It's for kindergarten to grade 12 school. And it's amazing how many parallels there were to this presentation as well. But is there any thought of expanding Fortitude beyond coding to go to schools, to do other topics?
So we have our marketing expert here, but
Jennifer Robertson.
so she's the marketing director for 42 US. So I think, yeah, they're trying to expand it to high schools. They are doing partnerships. I know there has been some in Paris. I know they have done that in Silicon Valley during summer to give students, to give high schooler or middle school students a taste of project-based learning and what development is, what
Sure.
programming is. Yeah.
Well, I just want to thank Lou again